What happens when a high school affair spirals into a murder plot? Let's unravel the case of Pamela Smart. Hey everyone, I'm Leah, feeling intrigued by today's topic.
And I'm Garrett, totally ready to dive into this wild story. Welcome to Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett. All right, let's set the stage for this one. Today we're exploring Pamela Smart and the 1990 murder of Greg Smart in Derry, New Hampshire. Here's a cool thought to kick off. The first time I heard about this case was on a true crime podcast during a road trip. I remember pulling over for coffee and thinking about how the cameras in the courtroom might have shaped everything. You know, media influence on trials is one of those topics that just sticks. This one had teen witnesses, secret recordings, and nonstop TV coverage. It made me wonder if transparency helped or if it turned the whole thing into a spectacle. That's pretty much what hooked me on digging deeper into this case.
Let's open the book on this. A quick primer on the key charge. Accomplice to first-degree murder means a person intentionally helps or encourages someone else to commit a premeditated killing. Premeditated just means planned in advance, even if that planning window is short. In this case, prosecutors said Pamela Smart orchestrated her husband Greg's murder, even though she wasn't physically there when it happened. The context is tough. Pamela, who was 22 at the time, admitted to an affair with William Billy Flynn, a 15-year-old student she met through a school program. Prosecutors argued she manipulated Flynn and his friends into killing Greg. The scene at the Smarts' condo was made to look like a burglary gone wrong. But investigators concluded it was staged, pointing to planning by the teenagers and, according to the state, direction from Pamela.
To fill in the other legal pieces, conspiracy to murder is basically an agreement between two or more people to commit murder, plus at least one step taken toward doing it. Witness tampering is trying to sway or stop someone from telling the truth to police or in court. The prosecution charged Pamela with all three: accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy, and witness tampering. And they leaned on two pillars. One, the teen co-conspirators who cut plea deals. A plea bargain is when you agree to plead guilty to something, usually for a lighter sentence, in exchange for your cooperation. And two, secretly recorded conversations captured by a student intern named Cecilia Pierce. Wearing a wire just means hiding a recording device while you talk to someone. Those tapes turned into big-time evidence, you know?
Okay, here we go from the top. Pamela Ann Wojcik, later Pamela Smart, was born in 1967 in Coral Gables, Florida. She grew up in Miami, then moved to Derry, New Hampshire in 8th grade. She went to Pinkerton Academy in Derry, where she was a cheerleader. Later, she returned to Florida for college at Florida State University and studied communications on a media performance track. She even hosted a college radio show and called herself the Maiden of Metal. That one always surprises people and paints a very different picture from the headlines that would come later. During a visit to New Hampshire, she met Greg Smart. They started dating in 1987 and married in 1989. Not long after, the marriage reportedly hit trouble. Pamela took a job as a media coordinator at Winnicott High School in Hampton, New Hampshire. Through a school program called Project Self-Esteem, she met William Billy Flynn, who was a sophomore, and a student intern named Cecilia Pierce, a friend of Flynn's. That's where these relationships start to intersect in really consequential ways.
Next up, the middle of the story, and it's rough. Pamela acknowledged she had an affair with Billy Flynn, who was 15. Prosecutors said she pushed him toward a plan to kill her husband. Flynn didn't act alone. Patrick Pete Randall, Vance J.R. Latham Jr., and Raymond Fowler were involved. In May 1990, Flynn shot Greg Smart inside the condo. Randall was in the condo, Lateem waited outside as the driver, and Fowler stayed in the car. The place was ransacked to look like a burglary. Investigators later said the burglary look was staged. A critical clue came when Vance Lateem Jr.'s father found a .38 caliber pistol at home and brought it to police, thinking it might be the murder weapon. That helped focus attention on the teens.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Police got an anonymous tip in May 1990, naming Cecilia Pierce as someone who knew about the plan. Cecilia, a student intern and friend of Flynn, agreed to wear a wire for the police. Those tapes captured Pamela making statements that prosecutors argued contradicted her claims of wanting to reconcile with Greg and of not knowing about the plan. Pamela has always said she didn't orchestrate the murder, but the recordings undercut her narrative in the eyes of the jury. In August 1990, Detective Daniel Pelletier arrested Pamela in her school parking lot and said on tape, "We've solved the murder of your husband. The bad news is you're under arrest." That line is chilling, and it became one of the defining soundbites of this case.
Then the trial began in March 1991 and ran for 14 days in Rockingham County Superior Court, and cameras were allowed in the courtroom, which was a big deal at the time. Assistant Attorney General Diane Nicolosi was the prosecutor and portrayed Pamela as the mastermind, arguing she wanted to avoid an expensive divorce and collect a $140,000 life insurance policy. Pamela denied that, but in March 1991, the jury found her guilty of accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy, and witness tampering. She received life in prison without the possibility of parole, which was mandatory under New Hampshire law. Meanwhile, the teen co-conspirators had plea deals, which matters a lot because plea bargains can create an incentive to testify. Flynn ended up sentenced for second-degree murder with parole eligibility that was later reduced to 25 years. He and Patrick Randall were both paroled in June 2015 to lifetime supervision. Latime's minimum got reduced, and he was paroled in 2005. Fowler's parole was granted, revoked on a violation, then granted again in 2005. Different roles, ages, and charges led to very different outcomes. It's a stark contrast to Pamela's life without parole.
After the conviction, Pamela was transferred in 1993 from New Hampshire to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in New York. Officials cited security reasons. The move was unusual because there wasn't a formal transfer agreement between the states, and her family says they weren't told in advance. In 1996, she was severely beaten by 2 inmates and needed a plastic plate in her face. She's reported ongoing pain and trauma from that assault. Over the years, she's also tutored inmates, earned 2 master's degrees from Mercy College, and joined the National Organization for Women, focusing on incarcerated women's rights. Legally, her federal habeas petition was denied in 2002 and upheld in 2004. In 2023, the New Hampshire Supreme Court dismissed a challenge related to a denied commutation hearing, and it was reported she lost her final appeal. In 2024, she released a statement accepting limited responsibility in the sense of saying she should have seen the signs, while still maintaining she didn't plan the murder. It's a complicated legacy for sure. Let's get to the heart of a big question. Did the media coverage, especially having cameras in the courtroom, influence the trial outcome? The HBO documentary Captivated by director Jeremiah Zagar leans into that issue. When a trial is televised, jurors are told not to watch news, but they still live in the world. Real talk, it's hard to unhear things or ignore a social temperature around a case. I think the coverage could have shaped how testimony sounded to jurors and even how witnesses presented themselves. It's human nature. A camera changes the room, right?
I hear you. Cameras change vibes. But the evidence here had weight. There were the secretly recorded conversations made by Cecilia Pierce, plus multiple teen witnesses who all connected dots. Even with plea deals, the stories lined up in a way the jury found convincing. You could argue the cameras added transparency and let the public see the process, which might build trust. It's not perfect, but it's something. If anything, I wonder if the intense coverage forced everyone, prosecution and defense, to be extra careful, and that could help a fair process, right?
That's fair, and it's a solid point. Still, the plea deals worry me. When a witness has a reason to curry favor, their testimony can be complicated. Add a national audience, and the pressure to tell a certain story or to present confidence might be stronger. I'm not saying the jury was wrong. I'm saying the conditions weren't neutral. If you imagine a quiet, media-free courtroom, the tone and timing could feel different. Maybe some exchanges would land more softly, or maybe the defense would have more space to explore doubts without that glare.
Quick why question back to you. Prosecutors didn't pursue a capital murder charge against Pamela. Why do you think that is?
Good question. The record shows prosecutors opted not to charge capital murder. The exact reasons aren't spelled out in what we've seen. What we do know is they pursued accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy and witness tampering, which still carried a mandatory life without parole sentence. Strategically, the state built around those charges and the available evidence, and the jury accepted that framework.
So if we picture a media-free version of the same trial, maybe public commentary goes way down and jurors feel a little less watched. But the recordings, the teen's testimony, the staged burglary detail, those are still there. I think the core narrative stands, even if the atmosphere feels different. Not gonna lie, that's something to chew on, huh?
Here's the pop culture layer. The 1995 film To Die For, directed by Gus Van Sant and written by Buck Henry, starred Nicole Kidman and drew inspiration from the case. It's a stylized take, not a documentary, but it locked this story into the cultural imagination, focusing on ambition, image, and manipulation. And then there's Captivated, the 2014 HBO documentary by Jeremiah Zagar, which really zeroes in on how cameras in the courtroom might tilt perception. Together, those two works kept this case alive in public conversation for decades. Counterfactual time. What if Cecilia Pierce had refused to wear a wire? Remember, she was a student intern and friend of Flynn. Without those recordings, the prosecution still has the teens, but they've all cut plea deals. The defense could lean harder on credibility attacks, saying the teens had every reason to say what prosecutors wanted. Without the tapes, jurors might hear more he said, she said, and less direct contradiction to Pamela's reconciliation story.
Yeah, let's puzzle that one out. Without the wire, you're left with testimony and the staged burglary inference, plus the gun link from the Latim household. That's a case, but it's more circumstantial. Circumstantial evidence means you're inferring what happened from surrounding facts, not watching a video of the act itself. Juries absolutely can convict on it, but it tends to require a tighter story. I could imagine a hung jury, or a conviction on fewer counts, or even a longer deliberation. Those tapes gave the state a through line to argue knowledge and intent. Without them, the defense has wider lanes to raise reasonable doubt.
And the ripple effects could be big. If conviction were harder to secure, the teens' deals might still stand. But public perception of fairness could swing. Some might say justice was uncertain, others might feel it was more balanced without the recordings. It's wild how one investigative decision, like asking a young person to wear a wire, can reshape the entire arc of a case. This one really resonates with me. It shows how fragile and pivotal evidence can be. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride.
Stay curious and keep exploring with us.
Until next time on Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett.